I'm going to start with the agenda. Today's agenda is going to include a brief introduction of Optimum Networking. We have a good mix of both current and long-term clients with Optimum Networking and some prospective folks that are just wanting to learn more about not only cybersecurity, but Optimum Networking. So thank you all for being here. Next, we will introduce a special guest in the realm of cyber liability. And that's Greg King, and Greg will go into some information about that because that is also a critical layer of cyber security that Optimum does not provide. Obviously, we are not a business commercial insurance company, so Greg is an expert on that area, and he will give us some great information about that. Next part is what I mentioned before. We want to hear from you. A lot of folks have questions, concerns, even fears about what's going on out there, and we can help tailor the message to that. So please unmute at that point and let us know kind of what's going on out there. Once this is established, I will share some just general information about cyber awareness. Awareness is very important in the overall picture of cybersecurity and how that would impact your business. And last would be the part that you're waiting for is Brett Ammerman, our Chief Security Officer and Chief Security Officer here, will be going into a lot more in depth of the different layers of cybersecurity that are critical to protect you and your company and your data and your employee and your client. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So Optimum Networking, our mission statement is helping people succeed with technology. So these workshops are a great example of how we can actualize that mission because technology is there to drive your business forward, but it can also be a vulnerability point. So Optimum Networking will be working with all of our clients to help folks with this. We do this through our core values: competency, trustworthy, optimism, being service-minded, gratitude, and always continually improving ourselves. We were established in 1995, as many of you may know. We have our two owners are also our founders, and we have a third owner, and that's Brett Ammerman on the call today. We do user support through our support desk. We maintain our clients' networks, backups. Cybersecurity is obviously what we're talking about today. Long-term and short-term IT strategy and planning, network security, projects for our clients, cloud computing. We also have a full data center for our clients for boutique hosting opportunities. We can also do voice over IP through vendors and make sure that's well integrated within your network. So that is Optimum Networking as an overview and also in a nutshell. Now we're going to move into that point. I'm going to introduce Greg King. He is our cyber liability expert. If you are not aware of your cyber liability coverage, we highly recommend that you either speak to your current insurance broker if you're not comfortable or you don't know who that is or you don't feel like they have the correct level of expertise. You're more than happy to, or you're more than welcome to reach out to Greg with any of those questions. Greg, do you want to go ahead and take it from here?
Yeah, that'd be great. And thank you for that introduction. And on that note, even if you have a relationship with your current broker and comfortable talking to them, but want to get some more information just on questions or how to go about talking to them, feel free to reach out to me. As much as I would like to have new clients, I'm just happy to help people and make sure that they're properly protected. So just feel free at any point. I'm going to go over some information here. It is going to be a lot of information, which we'll be covering fast. So again, feel free to reach out to me. What I'm going to talk about is really setting the stage, the general policy, underwriting and how that is changing, and along with that, the market conditions and where that is going at this point for us. And really, so we can go to the next slide. And really, when we're talking about cyber insurance, really, it's if the thing that we didn't think was going to happen has happened, what do we do now? So basically, you've worked with Optimum, you've set up all these security procedures and guards, and there's still an attack, a risk. What do you do from that point? And is looking to see, are you prepared to respond? Who can help? And really, what can your operation afford if there is a loss? Or what can you afford policy-wise to make sure that you mitigate and cover that loss for you? So if we go on to the next slide here, it's talking about the types of cyber losses that have happened, really the losses that have occurred over the last couple of years have shifted from large companies to small and medium-sized enterprises are 98% of the incidents that we're seeing right now. So it's really even when I talk to my clients and they talk about I'm a small business, we don't really have much of a threat. These people that are hacking and attacking it aren't looking at your business and your size. What they're doing is seeing a vulnerability in your IP system or some way to get in through a ransom attack, a phishing attack, and that's what they see if there's a way in. They don't really care what business you are and who you're working with.
Essentially, they're just looking for soft targets, correct?
Correct. And John and Brett can talk about it more, but these are really sophisticated enterprises, and these servers that they use, the people that are attacking it just see one little way in, and that's what they're going for. And that's the businesses that they're going to be targeting and finding a way in. And the average costs for these incidents have been going up dramatically from year to year. The average in 2018, the cost of a ransomware attack was less than $10,000. And in 2020, the average attack was $154,000. So these attacks are becoming more sophisticated and they're knowing who to target. And they're also getting information on insurance and finding out who has an insurance and the history of what insurance companies are paying out. And for ransom attacks, they're asking for amounts that they know these companies can pay. I actually just recently had a prospect that has reached out to me because a local Colorado company, and they just had a wire attack and they had $5.1 million transferred from their accounts. They did not have proper cybersecurity set up, and they did not have an insurance policy. And as I go through the policy, I'll talk about some of the items that they would have had covered and would help protect them for that. When we talk about the insurance policy, the biggest thing to know is that not all policies are created equal. As the insurance carriers understand the landscape, their policies are changing. As more attacks happen, policies are changing, and not every quote that you get is apples to apples. Not every policy is the same. So it's important to talk with your broker, a new broker, someone that understands the cyber insurance aspect of it, to make sure that you're being properly covered for your business and what your risks are, because not all businesses are going to share the same risk and need the same exact coverages, but you want to make sure you're properly covered. And the coverages are going to be third party, first party, which we'll talk about. And I'll go over some of the resources that come with the policies that are really some of the more beneficial aspects of that policy for us. So when we talk about cyber insurance, if we can go back to the third party coverage quickly.
I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. We're going to be talking about, it's not what happened to your business, but the attack, how it affected other individuals. Multimedia liability, if someone hacked into your company's website, Facebook, Instagram, and they started posting about the other company, and if there was anything that happened, people don't generally think of bodily injury or property damage, but as technology advances, depending on your company, if they get access to some of your systems that are connected to the internet in your internal servers, there could be injuries that occur with that. So it's maintaining those. And go to the next slide. This is an area where more people in businesses tend to think of is the first party in coverage. It's what's happened to you, to your business, cyber extortion, their ransom attacks, how it affects your reputation and brand. Depending on your business, if you don't have a safe website, that could really affect what's going on. And it's not even just the website, it's your internal servers and the information that you're keeping of your clients. So if you're a company, a business that has a lot of users, a lot of clients, and you keep their names, you keep their credit card information in your systems, that's a big risk, because if someone was able to attack and get that, that is essentially a gold mine for them, because then they have access to all of your clients' information. So it's those type of aspects. And also business income. If you are shut down because it's a ransom attack and you can't use your information, you can't use your systems, the cyber policy is there to cover you for that, to make sure that your business is not shut down and you're able to still run as you need to, and you can get your income for not only you, but for your employees to be going as well. And then the next slide, the resources. These are really, in my mind, some of the most important aspects for it. So you have a cyber attack. The policy is going to cover your legal fees. If you're being sued for it, if you need to do notices for it, it is covering it for you. And then the next most important one is the forensics. You don't know when they got access to your systems. You don't know how they got access to your systems. You don't know what information they still have even after the attack happened. This forensic goes back and the insurance policy covers that process. And that can add up to be quite a large amount for it. Brett and John can tell you the process for that and talk about it, but I believe the average attack, Brett, you can tell me, they're in there for a few months before someone even knows that they're in the systems.
That's accurate, Greg. And if you hire in a forensic expert, and they have to be approved by your insurance carrier, you're looking at an average of $500 an hour, depending on time of day. And that's usually a good rate. If you bring them in on an emergency, they can charge as much as $1,000 an hour. So it gets really expensive really fast.
Yeah, it gets very expensive. So that it's great in crisis management. And crisis management is quite a few things. The company that I mentioned before that had the $5 million attack, when I heard about it, I told them instantly to contact the FBI. The local law enforcement, if you have an attack, isn't really going to be able to do anything for you. The FBI has experts in this. They work with you for it. But when you have the policy, the insurance carriers and the brokers such as myself have relationships that help monitor that and facilitate it. And oftentimes they're able to at least track it down and see where it is, and help out. But you really want some sophisticated individuals that can work on your side for that. And that's where the policy is really helpful for you. And the policy, the underwriting has changed dramatically in the last year or two. I can tell you last year I had clients that their applications for cyber insurance was 1 page. Now it's generally 5 pages, supplemental applications, and going back and forth with the underwriters for additional questions. And the reason for that is they weren't underwriting it properly. They've seen significant losses. There's been a rise in ransomware attacks and attacks in general. I'm sure most of you remember the pipeline attack, which was a big one, the attack I just mentioned for $5 million. So the insurance underwriters are putting a lot more scrutiny on it. Their claims have been higher, so they need to underwrite better to better do that. And the factors for recommendations are now requirements. I was talking to Brett about this the other day. A mutual client that we're working on has only 2 or 3 people that use computers on a regular basis, but they can't get a quote right now without having multi-factor authentication in place, where before the insurance carriers were saying it was recommended to have it in place, but we can't even get an indication on pricing until it's actually in place. So that's changed in the last month and a half for me. So it's quite dramatic changes. And that's the important part for us there. And really the cyber insurance market conditions, I mean, unfortunately, it's going up in pricing. If anyone tells you they can save you money on insurance in general, or specifically cyber insurance, it's probably not accurate. It's probably not the same policy as we were talking about, apples to apples. And I don't like saying that because I'm in the business of selling the insurance and want to make it easier for my clients, but it's tough. The reasons for it are COVID, remote workforce. If people are working from home, their systems are more susceptible. They don't have the same safeguards. They may leave their computers open at home. So it's really working with your teams for policies, procedures to be in place if that's the case. Competition, a lot of markets in there. And the cost, the premiums are going up, retentions are increasing. Insurance companies make money 2 ways. One is through underwriting. Their underwriting has not been good for them. The other one is investing. But there's really strict requirements on insurance companies of how they can invest. They can't just buy stocks. They're really tied to the interest rates. Interest rates are really low right now, so they're not making all their money off of investments like they used to. So unfortunately, they need to make money through their premiums, which is going up. And the regulatory is just it's constantly changing. I know that was a lot of information in a very, very short period of time. But I want to see if there's any questions right now. And if you don't have any questions, my contact information is here. I'm always available just to answer questions, help you out, and talk about it.
Sure, thanks, Greg. And we'll, like I said, we'll open up a little bit with some concerns that folks are having off. And if any cyber liability questions come up, we'll certainly have you jump back in. So,
Appreciate it.
and before I get started with the general cyber awareness, I do have some very concerning and breaking news on the cybersecurity front. It turns out this actually was released today. The Chicago-based Ferrera candy company reported a ransomware attack. This is true. And everybody brace yourself. I don't want to cause a panic on the call, but it's very possible that we may not have enough candy corns for Halloween next week. And I know that without these, what will we really have Halloween, or should we just cancel Halloween? We've got things like the same company also does, your sweet tarts and your nerds and believe it or not, Laffy Taffy might be in short supply. So brace yourself for this. I know we talk about the pipelines, and food production shortages, but let's get real, people. We're talking about our candy corns potentially being interrupted, our resources. Yeah, a little bit of levity, I understand, but I did hear that on the news this morning, and I did verify that. So sure enough, as Greg mentioned, they don't really care what type of company they're attacking. They'll attack anybody if they're going to attack a candy corn company. So let's go ahead and move into. Go ahead and unmute yourselves at this point. If I didn't shock and scare people too much around the candy corn, let us know some of the issues, questions, concerns that you guys are having out there. For example, is the company you're working with or a company you worked with in the past, have they had a cyber breach? And if so, what was the impact of that? What's your perception of the cyber threats out there? Who do you see as the bad guys? What is your ideas around that? Frankly, how confident do you feel like you and your company is when it comes to cyber attacks? Are you supported? If you're supported by a managed service provider like Optimum Networking, how confident are you in their cybersecurity? Because as we'll see, and as Brett will talk about, you're not only vulnerable through a direct attack, but you also are vulnerable through attacks through vendors as well. What are your big concerns around cybersecurity incidents and breaches? Are you bound to industry regulations and these types of things, HIPAA, GDPR? One that I don't have here is a big one, which is CCMC, which is one that's required for government contractors right now, or people working with the DoD and the government. And backup is also an important point, which we'll go into. So I'd like to hear some feedback from folks that are on the call right now, either questions or concerns or stories of what's concerning you out there. Just go ahead and jump in.
I just want to let you know that I got my candy corn a couple of days ago, so I'm good there, Jonathan. Thanks.
Thank goodness, Brett. Thank goodness. And I have to warn people that if you don't chime in, I may call on you. So.
Hi, this is Olivia.
Oh, hi, Olivia. Thanks for joining us.
Hi. Actually, this was before I started, but our HR and accounting director was the victim of a social engineering attack, and she transferred $54,000 to a fraudulent company. And we have the FBI looking into it. I'm not super privy to the details. All I know is that I had to do e-discovery on her email account about a week ago. So this happened about, I think probably 8 months ago. And it was a big deal because it was a direct transfer it was an ACH transfer, and these people have been linked. This account has been linked to a crime syndicate in the UK. So it's pretty serious, and it's tough for a small business like Martin Technical to put these safeguards in place, because before they hired me, I'm the IT manager. They didn't have anybody. and they had no idea about social engineering attacks. They had no idea about phishing attacks or some of the ransomware attacks. And the Keystone pipeline was a worry, or the Colonial pipeline, sorry, was a worry to me. And so was SolarWinds. And I've tried to express that to my company, and they just won't listen. And I'm like, you're gonna get another ransomware attack. I don't know what you're gonna do. So it is concerning. Our CEO does get cyber insurance, and he let me know a day before it was supposed to be posted, like put into the insurance company, that we had to do it. And I'm like, oh no. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's and feel free to invite other folks from your organization to these workshops in the future, because sometimes just raising awareness is what's really key. So thank you very much, Olivia. I appreciate you chiming in there.
thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to call on Dan Marks. I've known Dan for a long time, and I know he's been in IT, and I know he represents a nonprofit. Dan, what concerns you, or what have you seen? You've been doing this a long time. I'm sure you've seen quite a bit of change.
Well, it's getting difficult more and more so every year. I just think it's just super easy to run these types of attacks. They're looking for vulnerabilities, and it's really easy to get in today if you don't have substantial on-prem protection. So
Yep, it's an excellent point.
And John, I want to touch on based on one thing with Olivia mentioned with the wire transfers to fraudulent companies. It's important to update policies and procedures within your company of how these transfers are being made. If you're ever making a wire transfer, call the people before you do it. Make sure it's the correct address. Sometimes when these attacks happen, as terrible as it is, it gives you a chance to look at what's internally happening and update it and make sure it doesn't happen again, but also gives advice to other people to go in and look at their procedures to how you can stop it. Because really, even working with Optimum to stop certain attacks, sometimes it's the error internally that could have stopped it.
Absolutely. We'll go a little bit more in depth with that. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate your input. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just talk about cyber awareness in general. And I always like to use an analogy of the pirates of old. And so we're going to go on a brief trip to yesteryear when pirates terrorized the high seas. These were criminals that have been romanticized in recent decades, but back in the day, it wasn't romantic at all. They were just scary. And in reality, they established a well-organized business model, if you want to believe it, that leveraged aggressive marketing, right? The Jolly Rogers, the skull and crossbones there, and branding to ensure that they could steal as much booty at the lowest possible cost. They didn't want to kill everybody. They just wanted people to have that fear of them, so that they would just give up the booty, right? So this included finding ways folks to surrender their riches without that promise of a fight. But if they knew that if they did fight, they would die, and they would die horribly. So that was the model they used. The Royal Navy was not able to stop them. So really, they were more concerned about people defending themselves rather than from the authorities. So let's look at what's changed. Not much, I'm afraid. The similarities are striking. The bad guys aren't, as exciting, as pirates. We don't really know because we don't see them all that often. But what we do know is that they are very well organized, they are very dangerous, and they are very good at what they do. So the similarities, as I mentioned, are frightening. These folks know that for the most part, the authorities do not have the resources to crack down and stop them. So they are operating with near impunity. The only way to protect yourself is to increase your awareness and to have the best tools and systems available in place. As I mentioned earlier when Greg was talking, and it's the bottom line here, you do not want to be a soft target. So as I mentioned, these guys are highly organized. These are developers. These are people that are just good at what they do. They utilize the dark web as a hub of operations. If you don't know what the dark web is, it's essentially the same as the internet that we do, but it's encrypted, and you can operate it without traceability and without being able to for people to find what you're doing exactly on there. They do see this as a business. This is not just sort of a one-off crime or a passion crime or these types of things. It's people go into work every day to see how much they can steal. They police their own. What I mean by that is they typically do pay the ransom back. Why? Because they want to be able to do it again and again. And if people are afraid that or concerned, why bother pay the ransom? They're not going to give me the money back. That's bad for business, right? So in that regard, they are in business. And as I mentioned again, the authorities are not close to cracking down on these folks. We need to protect ourselves. Here is an example of something that we did copy off of the dark web. And this is an example of how this is just monetized and distributed. Anybody who, you don't even have to be good at development. It's hacking as a service. This is one example. Here's another one where you can see how much it costs, per attack per day, if you will. And you send out, tens of thousands of these things, and you hope for a reward. So,
Jonathan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing. They completely treat it like a business too. So the thing is, they'll actually provide like sales bonuses, all of that. They see it as strictly a business. Some of these bigger operations.
You betcha, Dan. That's exactly what I'm getting at, and a lot of people don't realize that. They think it's some kid in their mom's basement. It's not. It's a big business now. So with that, we're going to move on to what we can do about this. And I'm going to introduce to you Brett Ammerman. He is co-owner and chief technical officer here at Optimum Networking. He is also our chief security officer. So Brett has over 30 years of industry experience. He also is up to date on every single latest and greatest, as you will see. Brett, do you want to give yourself a quick introduction?
You bet. Thanks, Jonathan. And Greg, thanks for your presentation on cybersecurity insurance. I think that nobody can have enough of that. I know it's getting more expensive every day. So the sooner you get in, the better your policy rates are going to be for the underwriting. I started in IT out of college, and so I've got a lot of industry experience, as Jonathan talked about. I started building and selling computers out of my basement and in Anchorage, Alaska, and then it soon turned into big business for me. And I remember the first virus that I encountered on a bulletin board service, and I'm really dating myself, but it was all dial-up back in that day. And I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me that I did have a virus that I had downloaded as a driver that I thought was a driver. That was my first foray into security or not ransomware, but into viruses out there on the internet. I moved on to a credit card processing company, started working with them for a few years, and then to a large engineering firm where I was for 18 years before joining Optimum Networking. The two founders that Jonathan referenced earlier, Joe and Tracy, all three of us worked at this large engineering firm for a number of years together before they started Optimum. And I like to tell the story that I had kids, they didn't, so it was a lot easier for them to jump, but we continued to use Joe and Tracy as contractors at our company and stayed in close contact. And when it was time for me to go, the engineering company had grown up to 31,000 employees, and I reported to the CIO, and I could see I was getting more into the politics and less in the tech, and I really wanted to stay in the tech. And so that's when I knocked on Tracy and Joe's door and joined them almost 9 years ago, 8.5 years ago. But it's just been a wild ride that I would not replace for anything. It's been fun. We take that enterprise experience that we had grown at the engineering company, and we bring it to all of our customers so that they get the benefit of that. Let's just call it a gun for hire. We've been there, done that. We've got several T-shirts to prove it, and it's really fun to get out and work in all of our customers' environments and give them that expertise as well. So,
great, Brett. And I'd like to get started here because I mentioned earlier that One of the ways that folks are vulnerable, that they don't know that they're vulnerable, is through the vendors they work with. And their IT vendor is no different than that. So I thought you could give us a quick overview of what Optimum is doing to keep ourselves secure, so that people would know that that this is, critical of what we're doing, and also to maybe think about, if Optimum is not the provider, to ensure that whoever is supporting them is secure.
Certainly. So the first bullet talks about a strong and well-established company, and I think when Joe and Tracy started the company, they brought that resource to bear, and we've grown over the years, and we're at 50 people strong at this point in time. We feel like we've got a lot of folks who've been with us for a very long time, and as such, we've got some great industry experience. Smaller companies, shops like Optimum, the MSP, in the MSP realm, you usually have one guy or maybe two, but we've got 30, 35 engineers on staff that all use each other as a great backstop to help each other out. And so with all of that experience, we really can bring a lot of resources when there is an issue of any kind. We practice what we preach. And with that, we talked a little bit about multi-factor authentication. One of my watchwords whenever we bring any tools into our environment for our clients is that it has to have multi-factor authentication available. That keeps the bad guys out and the good guys are safe. And then that keeps our customers safe as well. Not everybody can afford to have the tools that we have. And so we like to make sure that if we're going to bring something in, we are secure first, and then it takes care of the client second. And then we've also got some dedicated folks that actually deal with security on a daily basis. And not only that, we have 24/7 monitoring, not only for our environment, but for also some of our clients who require that. And so we have the ability to bring just about anything you need in the security realm to bear. So,
yeah, and we'll go into more detail about that through the presentation, Brett, but thank you for that overview. Appreciate it. And this is an overview of the layers of security that we want to describe today. So we're going to start talking about backups, because that is really the backdrop, the last ditch protector for any environment, whether it be for a cybersecurity incident, a breach, or even a natural disaster. Then we're going to talk about the external protection from the outside world in, and then the internal protection, meaning more towards that the workstation level. Brett mentioned the 24/7 monitoring. That's what they call SOC SIM these days. Brett will go into detail about that. User training and policies are also critical. That's more the human level of protection. So we will go into each of these, and we're going to start with backups. Brett, can you take it and let us know a little bit more about security and backups?
You bet. In today's realm, ransomware really hits you right where it counts. And we like to see that if somebody gets encrypted, all their data encrypted, that we have good backups. Our watchword is that there's basically 4 immutable laws of backups. First, you have to have them, and not everybody does. And we won't take a client if they aren't using backup software of some kind. That's just how critical we think that it is. And then we want to make sure that you got your data off-site. In the old days, you'd have roll Iron Mountain up to the door, put tapes into a lockbox, and they'd take it away. And you do that every day. Now we can replicate that off-site to a redundant data center. And then with our software, we actually replicate it from the East Coast to the West Coast. We actually have it in 2 locations for you, just in case something happens in Boston. LA is ready to go with it as soon as it hits there. We monitor and test the backup process. With our security as a service, that's one of our watchwords, is making sure that we are testing restores to make. We do restores all the time for our clients when they are missing a file, but we like to do complete tests and say, here's the whole server that's been restored, just to make sure that we can do it and that this data is there for you. And then ensure that our backups are secure. In the past, what the ransomware folks would do if they would get on undetected into your environment. They would find your backup software, they would disable it, or they would make it back up something obscure instead of what your real data is for a period of time before they attacked, so that they knew that your backups were basically useless, because they could get right into your backup software. Well, our software is password protected. You can't launch it locally without a secure password. That keeps them out. They may stop the service, but we're monitoring that software on a daily basis. Anytime that there's a warning or an error, we've got somebody making sure that they're looking at those jobs daily. That's kind of what we feel are really critical for backups.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Brett. I ask people all the time, are you backed up? And they say yes. But then the question is, are they doing all of these things? Is it cloud-based or offsite? Are they testing it or monitoring it? And do they have dedicated resources for that? And they can ensure the security. So the answer to the question where they may say yes because they have some sort of tape drive or USB device or some some NAS device, they're not necessarily backed up unless they're doing these four things. Okay, so let's go to the next layer, which would be the external protection and next-gen firewalls. Brett, can you describe some of the advantages around that and also some of the limitations?
Certainly. So next-gen firewalls have been around for a few years now, but they're really starting to get advanced. We're a big Fortinet shop, and looking, if anybody's a Gartner fan, they're in the top corner, the magic quadrant for Gartner, and we picked Fortinet for a reason, is they do a really good job. They can keep people from getting into your system a couple of different ways. We do geo-IP blocking, which means that if you haven't got anybody working outside the United States, we won't let any country into your network from outside the US. And if you've got people traveling, we can do a whitelist for a period of time, but then we shut it back down as soon as they're back in the country. That allows people to get in and access files or get to their email server and do work while they're remote if they need to. Additionally, they do web content filtering. And what that means is if your people are on the inside of the firewall going out to the internet and surfing, we're looking at the content that's coming back in and saying, is this appropriate? There's, let's just say, 80 different content groups that we can allow in or out, from social media to porn to job search, you name it. We can block that kind of content if you'd like, which is a really good thing. And then the other thing that happens with that is if a website has been compromised, then we stop that bad traffic from getting back in as well. Again, it restricts the inbound traffic, and then the virus and the malware, we can take care of that as well with the firewall. The cons against the firewall is that it only protects folks that are behind the firewall. And with COVID, we've seen a lot more folks move outside that protective fence, and they're working remotely. And so unless they VPN into your network and then go to the internet, they're usually going direct. And so the firewall does not allow for any kind of support there. And then we can't scan for everything. There's 0-day events that happen, and they're really tough to get a hold of in that even behind the next-gen firewall, because a lot of that code is written just the same day specifically for a specific company. So,
yeah, and it's important, Brett, for people to realize the layered nature of this, because I've had people say, well, I have a firewall, I'm okay, or I have antivirus, I'm okay. And again, it's needing to know those layers and the critical nature of it. So, and I think even Greg mentioned that insurance providers are considering higher vulnerabilities with people working from home so much now. So, can you talk about how we can help people more on the individual or desktop level?
Right. The next layer of that is really your PC. And we provide WebRoot with our service, which is an antivirus, anti-malware product, which is a really unique product from what our perspective is. They're a cloud-based environment. In other words, we're not in the old days. You would download a package of all of the signatures of all the known viruses, and it'd slow your computer down, and it would take up a lot of disk space. What WebRoot does is completely different. It updates the client periodically, but it's going out to the internet and checking for signatures to say, hey, is this really a bad thing or not? And so it doesn't need as much overhead, and it doesn't need as much disk space. And so it does a really good job. The one thing that's very unique to WebRoot is their big data on the back end out in the cloud. They scan every IP address on the internet 3 times a day. What that means is an IP address for a website, I'm just going to use abc.com. If that website is compromised, WebRoot is scanning that data on their website to say, hey, did somebody plant some malware on there? And if they are, then it's going to start blocking you from going to abc.com. And then when it's clean, they'll automatically let you go back to that website, but you'll get a flash on your screen saying, hey, this has got malware on it. We're not going to let you get you. We're going to protect you. Secondly, with our security as a service program, we're enabling DNS protection with WebRoot, which is like having your own personal firewall built into your computer, so that when you leave the confines of your office and go remote, whether it's at DIA or you're working from home or Starbucks, the shields go up just like they do with that next-gen firewall in the office. And so you have that same kind of protection for social media blocking, web content filtering, and then also looking for malware coming from the internet in before it even gets on your machine and gets to scan. It scans for malware automatically and detects that, which is a dual factor from my perspective. Most antivirus don't have that anti-malware. And then the multi-factor authentication is another component that we like to layer into. We've all seen that at our banking sites where they require you to have a 6-digit code to get logged in to see your accounts. You're starting to see that as almost the de facto. Office 365 is another place where we're almost de facto requiring folks to use multi-factor authentication, because that right now is the biggest target. We talked a little bit about that social engineering component. And if you don't have multi-factor on there, somebody can jump into your email, start monitoring you remotely, see where the email is going. If you're a bookkeeper, they see that you're going to cut a check to one of your vendors, and they can jump into the middle with an email, send you an email that looks just like the email that you sent out. While they block the email coming in from everybody else, it looks like it, but the domain name may be one character off. And so you start thinking that you're communicating with you. They tell you where to send the check, or they tell you where to do the ACH, and all of a sudden you've wired money out without even knowing about it. So it's really easy to get into Office 365 if people aren't using multi-factor authentication. It really does. And so with WebRoot, we really have the ability to help protect your folks when they're outside the network.
Very good. Thanks so much. And then I'd like to go in a little bit into a new offering we have now, which is the SOC SIM. Can you let people know the advantages there?
You bet. So the difference between a SOC and a SIM, the SIM stands for Security Incident and Event Management. In other words, we're going to look at all the events coming out of your firewall, your servers, your computers, and we're going to track those. And so with this SIM offering, we have the ability to hold on to data for 13 months, which is a really good thing if you want to look at historical data. The SOC is the component that allows the Security Operations Center that allows you to monitor things real time. You've got actual humans watching what's happening out there with your computers and your firewalls to know, hey, do we need to sandbox this computer and shut it down so it can't do any further damage? And then they wake us up in the middle of the night to make sure that we can get out there and help remediate as quickly as possible. This is not something that we do internally, but we do outsource this. And what we do with the SOC SIM offering for a lot of our clients nowadays is really key, because we're monitoring not only your computers, whether they're on your LAN or if they're at home or traveling. We've got an agent that goes out there and tracks everything that's happening. We're watching your firewalls. And then we're also monitoring Office 365, so we can see what's happening as far as logins. We can do the same thing with Office 365. We can do geo-IP blocking and say nobody from outside of the U.S. can log into your tenant. And so that keeps what we've seen in the past when we don't have this kind of monitoring going on. Somebody from Lithuania will log into they'll hack the password and get into a mailbox, and then they'll start sending email out as one of your employees. If we have that monitoring going on, we can not only notice it, but then block it automatically. And then we can report on it. And so you have the ability to do that. The nice thing about the logging that goes along with all that monitoring is not usually one thing tips a hand of a black hat. It'll be 2 or 3 things. But if they're happening 1 month ago or 3 months ago or just happened today, if you take all 3 of those events and put them together, then all of a sudden the red light goes off and we are able to start to say, hey, we got a real situation going on here and we can lock things down quicker. Any one of those events on their own are really hard to diagnose. But if you add them all up and say, hey, it's all coming from this location, we know exactly what's going on, and it allows us to be much more proactive on the security side. So we feel really good about what we're doing with that.
Great, Brett. Thank you. And I'm going to move to the next level, which we're going to talk about is the human layer. If you can just get a picture of concentric circles here, we're getting closer and closer. But this is, and this is not in dispute, or it is the #1 cause for security breaches. Everything that Brett talked about, the SOC SIMs, the firewalls, the antivirus, the malware protection, that is all more or less a reactive ability to stop attacks. This is the best proactive thing you can do to help protect your business, and that's cyber awareness training. It's not what we're talking about here. This is just a cyber awareness workshop, so it gives you a high level. It will be helpful. I mean, we are all much more protected when we are aware of our surroundings and what the threats are out there. But this is much more of a targeted training for all of your employees, where they start off with a training and a baseline that's required that they do online, and you get reporting for that. And then what it will do, it will give them a periodic random phishing attack that's not a real one. And if they are fooled by it, it routes them back to the training and you get reporting. So you can see if you have repeat offenders, people that are either not doing the training or not paying attention, or just being more careless than you need to. You can be more proactive with those employees ahead of time, because I'm going to say it again, the #1 cause for security breaches are people just clicking on the wrong thing. We do dark web scans for our clients as well. That means we're able to do a scan on that scary dark web that I talked about earlier. And what we see there is if you have usernames and passwords of your employees, there may be compromised passwords out there. And if that's so, we give you a report of those passwords. You go back to said employee and tell them, #1, are you using any of those passwords for your work securities? And then hopefully that was a no. But it may be a value add for them, because they may still be using those personally and not knowing that they've been compromised. So that's another layer that we help people proactively on.
Along with that,
yeah, go ahead.
We have, with our security service, we offer a password safe, so that folks don't recycle passwords, because that's the #1 thing is once you get one password, then they start scouring the internet for other locations where you've logged in. And they know that people don't like to use multiple passwords, so they can get in wherever you use that password. We like to train folks to use a password safe so that they use a randomized password for every site that they go to, so that there is no, it's all unique, and it really is a lot safer for folks out there if they have better password hygiene.
Excellent, Brett. And I'm going to add that for future presentations onto the slide. That's an omission. But last but not least, compliance and performance reporting availability. That can also be just your cyber liability or somebody like Greg saying, hey, check off these boxes, and so we can make sure we get this underwritten, and rather than having to scramble and do that yourself, our team, our account managers can help you with things like that. And speaking of compliance, there is a lot of policy and a lot of different types of certifications that are or that need to be had out there. So Brett, can you talk a little high level about how we help people with on the policy side?
You bet. So anybody who's using Office 365 or Active Directory today, Microsoft Active Directory, they have password policies, and a lot of folks don't really like to have a policy that says, hey, you got to change it every so often, and it's got to be so long, and it's got to be so complex. Well, we like to make sure that we get them on board with accepting that kind of thing, as well as what's acceptable use for using an asset that belongs to your company. Should they be using it to go out and do their social media? If it's not related to work, should they be using it to do football pools, those kinds of things? Should they be using their personal email? And so acceptable use policies are a big thing that go along with what we can work with you on as well. And then network access. If you're using a bring your own device computer from home, what can you do on your company network and what can't you do? And same thing with your mobile devices. Everybody's got a cell phone these days, or an iPad or a Slate or some kind of device. What's acceptable to be used in there, and how much data do we allow them to download onto those things? If they're compromised, lost, or stolen, you want to make sure that you know how to wipe them remotely, and how much information is at risk if they do lose that. The next one is a managed service provider framework, and this is a DNS entry that helps clean up spam and spear phishing and spoofing. There's also DMARC and DKIM that go along with that. At a minimum, we help set up SPF records for all of our security clients, and then if they do the premium plan, we'll do the DMARC and DKIM, set that up for them as well. And then we like to help with audit assistance or with cyber insurance policies. Greg's, whenever he's asking folks for questionnaires about what they do and don't do with surrounding cybersecurity, we help the client get through those and answer those as quickly as possible so that they can get underwritten and are safe. It also helps lower those policies costs as well if you answer the questions the way that the insurance underwriters would like. And then the supply chain threats. I talked a little bit about that, where people will jump in the middle of an email thread, and then all of a sudden you're paying the wrong vendor. So
great, thank you, Brett. So I'm going to do a quick summary here. Awareness is the most important thing to keep in mind. That is, if you're a much softer, more vulnerable target if you just don't know the threats out there. And so that's not just the people on the call here today. Hopefully your awareness has just been raised to a certain degree, but that's the folks around you, and that's every single employee that touches any sort of technology or the network. And with that, making sure that your approach to stopping cyber criminals is multi-layered, that you don't just say, I've got this or I've got that and I'm okay. So you work with a group like Optimum that has that full suite and layered protection. And my engineers, I'm around them all the time, would kill me if I didn't emphasize again and again, backup. Backups can be your, as the owner, one of the owner here, Joe Turnbow, likes to say, your get out of jail free card. If you're properly backed up and those backups are secured, sure, somebody can encrypt your network or cause some sort of havoc, and we can just get you restarted and get you rebuilt and get you on your way if your backups are being are well protected and well monitored and set up. So you'll see, and I'll be sending this out to everybody. That they'll have some resources, some different articles if you want to go a little bit more in depth. Before I ask for questions, I'm going to give everybody a quick save the date for our next workshop. A lot of folks have already done our Microsoft 365 productivity workshop. That is an overview of the Microsoft 365 environment and how it can benefit your team. But we've been doing this for the better part of a year now. And I think many people have already seen that. So we decided to do a Microsoft 365 Productivity 2.0. So this is for folks that do have that general idea or understanding of Microsoft 365, but would like to spend some time and drill down a little bit into 3 specific areas: adoption, access, and we'll also share some fun tips and tricks to make things easier and make it easier for your team to leverage these tools. So it will be Thursday, November 28th. That might not be right, guys. That might be Thanksgiving. I think I had it the week before that. So, but you will be getting a save the date email on that, as well as an email invite early next week. So don't write that date down until I verify it. I apologize. But same time, it's going to be a Thursday. It's going to be at 12:30, like I try to do these websites going forward. So, but keep that in mind, and you'll get this presentation and you'll get a save the date shortly, and I'll make sure I have the correct date there. So we are just at 1:30. So I do respect and I appreciate everybody's time. I know the time is the most valuable thing we have as human beings here on this planet, and you decide to spend an hour with us. I'm hoping it was beneficial for you. Brett, do you have a few minutes if people want to stay on and ask a few questions?
Certainly.
So feel free to stay on and ask questions of Brett. Otherwise, please look for the follow-up email that'll have this presentation in a PowerPoint, as well as a recording of it in case you missed any of it, or you'd like to show somebody else. But otherwise, have a great rest of Thursday and have a great Friday tomorrow, heading into the weekend. Thanks, everybody. And again, please feel free to unmute and ask any questions for Brett that you might have.
Hey, Brett, it's Steve.
Yes.
How many questions do I get?
Let's see where it goes, Steve.
All right. So the first one's an easy one. The backup solution that you were talking about, is that the Encore that we're using? Or
That is Encore, yes.
Okay. All right, good. Second question is, when you started talking about cybersecurity outside the Fortinet, as you're aware, we're a Citrix shop. We have now, because of COVID, we have a number of users that are working remote. What is our exposure with those users coming in through the NetScaler?
That's a great question. The key is making sure that Citrix environment is patched on a regular basis and that you guys are up to date. Secondly, what's your policy for allowing folks to download data or to access data directly to the network from their computer once they're connected to the Citrix environment? Most folks like to block that and say they can screen scrape, but that's it. They can't do anything more than print. They can't share data between their computer and your network, and that allows, if there's malware on their computer, that keeps that out. The other side of that is make sure that they're using a company asset that you know is patched and is protected by antivirus and is up to date. And so I would recommend that. The last piece is I would make sure that there's at least MFA to get onto your NetScaler. And if not, then I would have a VPN, SSL VPN connection that's MFA allowed to get onto your Citrix NetScaler then instead. So. Okay,
great. Well, we do require MFA for all the users connecting outside the network on the NetScaler, but the piece where it's a little difficult, especially in today's world, is that most of these users are connecting with their home computers. I mean, simply because I can't source equipment now, even if I wanted to send something home for these users. When you talked about the web route, how would that transpire? And is that something that we can then push out and force these BYODs to run web route on them, or how would that work?
That's a great question. I know that what we enforce with our clients that use the monitoring tool, remote monitoring and management tool that we deploy on all of our endpoints requires webroot to be installed. And so it automatically pushes it on a daily basis so that we know that it's there and it's up to date. You can do that with Active Directory as well without group policy. But if they're remote computers that don't check in with group policy, or their home versions of networks, it's really hard to enforce that without having some kind of mobile device management employed, like we do with our remote management and monitoring, the Atlas tool that you're familiar with that we put on your servers. So.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I have. That wasn't too bad.
Yeah,
Thanks,
good question, Steve.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Olivia, did you have any questions? I know you stayed on.
I have several, and they're pretty high level. So our CEO is very adverse to any on-site equipment. He wants everything to be in the cloud. And I have tried to express to him that that's just not possible. He doesn't want to listen to me. How would you go about trying to persuade him to get like on-site firewalls and that kind of thing, the SD-WAN for like remote employees or something like that? I just want, I'm not asking for servers, I'm asking for on-site networking equipment, and he doesn't even want to do that.
So there's a old school thought that if you've got, I'm just going to use Comcast because they provide a modem that does have some level of protection, that's good enough for who it's for. And realistically anymore, it's not. To try and convince, you just about have to show white papers that show exposures for whoever your provider is to say, this is what's happened in this instance where the firewall wasn't in place to try and protect the environment. I think it's a two-way street. It's not only what's going into the network, but it's also what's going out. And that's where the next-gen firewalls really make a big difference. They work not only for that web content filtering, but they also protect folks if there is some kind of a breach of some kind. Ransomware requires that they phone home to get a security key. And if you have the right programming on your firewall, it's not going to allow them to phone home. So then they won't be able to encrypt your environment without that key. If they actually do get in and start to have an impact on your environment. I think the other thing that if you start to talk about next-gen firewalls, sometimes you can be at risk just by your employees going places that they shouldn't and then exposing other employees around them to that bad behavior. And then all of a sudden you're going to get sued because of somebody doing something online that really is not appropriate. And so there's several reasons to bring that to bear.
Yeah.
If that helps.
And Olivia, I'm going to just chime in there that a lot of the reasons why executives are wanting to go to the cloud is for cost reasons. They don't want to invest, tens of thousands of dollars in server equipment where they believe is going to become obsolete. And that is completely understandable. And I would give them that, but also just let them know that these next-gen firewalls are not tens of thousands. They're more in the hundreds or lower thousand. I think I mentioned to you that we even just provide them as part of our overall managed services as a hardware as a service. So sometimes it's a CapEx versus OpEx type of thing as well. So that you can go on kind of on the financial side there. Just listen to their concerns. And then address them that way, I think is a good way to go. We also have somebody from actually works at Comcast, and Clay, I know that you and I spoke, And even though you're with Comcast and you talk about the security they provide, you recommend that your Comcast clients have firewalls too, correct?
Yes, we do. So as far as the firewalls that we provide for our modems, I mean, they're going to be like, they're going to be basic. It's going to give you some basic protection, but it's not going to be like full on protection like what your company offers.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, thanks again for everybody that stayed on. I hope you all enjoyed your Grubhub, and I will get these out to you, if not today, early next or tomorrow, sort of that recap, and we'll go from there. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you.
You bet.